Okay.
All right, we're back. Wow, Stacy, that's incredible. I've never heard rap music like that.
Really? You thought it was rap? I thought it was reggae.
You know, to get whales together to sing in unison in this way is fantastic. I've never heard anything like it here in RDU.
Is that a practical joke? If you think it's a practical joke, send your emails to info@maxkeiser.com.
Wow.
So what do you think? You know, there was a lot of stories in the past week about whether or not asset bubbles are good and whether or not there's an asset bubble. Because, you know, like U.S. markets are up, I think, 75% from their low. Emerging markets are up 95%.
Yeah.
Nouriel Roubini from New York University, the famed economist for predicting, one of the economists that predicted the crash.
He's a hot economist, man. I see him down at the disco.
Exactly. He was disco dancing through that musical break we just had, and he is saying that the central banks around the world printing money and slashing rates is creating the mother of all bubbles, and it's going to be even worse than the crash. But in the Financial Times, there was a big piece written by Frederick Mishkin.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, who said that it's not that he attempts to reassure that the pure irrational exuberance bubble presents few dangers to the economy. So he thinks asset bubbles are not a danger to the economy, and he believes that the central banks can just mop up the mess afterward.
Yeah, I read that Michigan piece. He basically is trying to differentiate between two bubbles. One bubble, he thinks it's a superficial bubble and not a structural bubble that is not to worry about. And the other one is more structural in nature and systemic crisis provoking, and that is something to worry about. And the current bubble, as he sees it, is a superficial bubble that even if it popped wouldn't result in any meaningful downdraft in the economy. And I read also the letters that people wrote in the next day and 2 days after Michigan's editorial in the Financial Times, basically discrediting his theories as being woefully lacking in any integrity in terms of the full picture that one needs to paint if one wants to give a detailed analysis of the way that credit bubbles are formed in this economy, this fiat currency, fractional reserve global economy. And the net result is that Michigan looked like an intellectual peewee compared to Nouriel Roubini, who has the weight of precedents behind him and historical accurate predictions that will stand the test of time.
Well, somebody wrote, Ruth Nash from London wrote to the Financial Times saying, Frederick Mishkin attempts to reassure us that the pure irrational exuberance bubble presents few dangers to the economy because it is not financed by leverage, he's saying. So to support his argument, he cites the bursting of the tech stock bubble and the relatively mild recession that accompanied it. However, he fails to mention the fact that the federal funds rate was cut from 6.5% at the start of 2001 to 1.75% by the end of that year, ultimately ensuring that the tech bubble mutated into a housing bubble. If there was nothing to fear from the bursting of this bubble, why did the Federal Open Market Committee take such drastic action?
That's right. That's what I just said.
Yeah, but it's a corruption, isn't it? I think, we have political corruption across all of the Western world, especially in America. It's so blatant. But when corrupt policies and corrupt politicians completely always win, it makes everybody in the society corrupt. So I think the corruption of markets like this and the corruption of monetary policy means that it encourages more and more people to become wild speculators because it is a corrupt monetary system.
Well, there is definitely a push toward destigmatizing speculative behavior in society as a legitimate form of employment, so that people will increasingly be gambling, whether it's at casinos in the analog space of Las Vegas or online in cyberspace. And you already see this with the rise of poker and the way poker has been made into a sport on, ESPN presents poker. It's right up there with golf and ice hockey as a sport that people aspire to and play. And And this trend will continue so that everybody will basically be spending 3 or 4 hours a day gambling.
Yeah, I mean, you also see it, this normalization where you said, I mean, we talked about this where Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, said that what they do is God's work. So, I mean, this is the exact opposite of what was the notion for much of history that gambling was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And their annual report for their charity, which is like a $200 million charity.
Yeah.
It showed that it was it was traded like a wild speculative hedge fund.
Yeah,
that this is the first time they've ever seen, analysts who looked at it said they've never seen any charity traded like that.
Well, all funds are basically now in pools that are being traded as like a hedge fund, which is basically just a speculative pool of capital. And I read something, again, I read it every once in a while. It's a very interesting essay on the role of the specialist in these financial markets. And the specialist who is responsible for making markets and creating prices acts as both a broker, which means that they match buyers and sellers, but they also act as a principal, which means that they maintain an inventory of whatever it is they're dealing in as a way to make sure that markets are quote-unquote liquid. And the role of the dealer, of course, means that they're playing both sides of the market and they have inside information. And it's this role as dealer that you see infecting the banking market on a system-wide basis. This is how Goldman Sachs can report these huge profits, is that as a dealer, they're both the buyer and the seller for all of these deals that happen and all of these trades that are happening on the exchange, whether it's using their high-frequency trading algorithms or some other algorithms. They're both the buyer and the seller, and they have perfect inside information, and they're capitalizing on that inside information. And when you question them on it, they're saying, well, as a dealer, as a principal, we need to maintain our inventory to ensure quote-unquote liquidity. But that's just an excuse for stealing, essentially. And they're draining the system of capital. And the result is wild income and wealth gaps, rising unemployment, lowering wages, and a rising tide of social unrest and violence. It's directly the result of these guys on Wall Street pilfering.
Well, with that, honey, believe it or not, once again, we're at the end of a show for RDU 98.5 FM in Christchurch, New Zealand.
All right, well, until next week, it's Max and Stacy saying bye, y'all.